was beginning to collapse, and they were doing everything they could do to keep it going.
By offering more and more risky loans to more and more people who could not afford them, the system managed to keep itself afloat, though it was clear to those in the know that at this point the party was already over.
And this was done from the top down. This was not the mortgage lenders, the so-called subprime lenders doing this, because they were merely creatures of the system. I mean, a subprime lender makes loans and then turns around and sells them to some bigger institution. If the bigger institutions don't want them, then the subprime lender goes out of business. But they were just creatures intended as middlemen because they couldn't survive this process. Sooner or later it would blow up. So the big banks didn't really want to do this thing on their own, so they had these middlemen to do it. And that's what blew up. And that's what became known as the subprime crisis.
Finally, the banking establishment began to realize that the situation was untenable. Unable to stop the blowout, the bankers resorted to shaping how it would be perceived. In June of 2007, the largest subprime lender, Bear Stearns, found that its paper was no longer being accepted at face value.
Memo to Bear Stearns. I don't want to create fear. I like Bear Stearns very much, but I think that at this stage, this is not a good call. They shouldn't have done it, and they should have just said, you know what, we're doing well, and don't say another thing. Just don't say it, because it does not inspire confidence to have 10 headlines coming over about what to do. I don't like it. This is about Bernanke. He has to be on that call. Forget the investors. The investors are going to do, if Bernanke listens, Bernanke needs to open the discount window. That's how bad things are out there. Bernanke needs to focus on this. Alan Greenspan told everyone to take a teaser rate and then raise the rate 17 times. And Bernanke is being an academic. It is no time to be an academic. It is time to get on the Bear Stearns call. Listen, open the darn Fed window. He has no idea how bad it is out there. He has no idea. He has no idea.
Kramer.
I have talked to the heads of almost every single one of these firms in the last 72 hours, and he has no idea what it's like out there. None!
This triggered a chain reaction, and over 80 mortgage lenders disappeared. The U.S. Treasury and European Central Bank were buffaloed by the City of London into pumping hundreds of billions of dollars into the system by the end of the year, in order to prevent the major banks from going under. Meanwhile, the U.S. population was being primed for a fascist intervention.
Now, there is no financial solution to this because the financial system has in fact died. So the solution is in the political realm.
Today, as the world faces a crisis comparable to that of 1923, the political solution proffered by some is massive cuts in social services, such as health care and pensions. Like feudal barons, financial agencies are moving to assume control over the nation's infrastructure, restricting its usage to those rich enough to pay the rising tolls. This time, the apparatus which would be used is what is termed misleadingly a public-private partnership.
A public-private partnership is a way in which a private corporation can take over infrastructure which was built by taxpayer money and then charge the taxpayers to use it. Is basically the simple answer in the context of the way these things are being used today. That the idea is that since governments can't afford to build all the infrastructure projects they need to build, that the private sector will help them out. And that in return for helping build infrastructure, the private sector gets to own it or own some of the income stream from it.
In what is a sick irony, the very same people who have made it impossible to maintain infrastructure now intend to enslave the nation by possessing what little of it remains. In true Mussolini fashion, the actual need for infrastructure development is being used as the sugar coating for hoodwinking the population into swallowing the poisonous pill of corporativism.
Make no mistake about it, we have an infrastructure crisis.
Nonstop television showed us in New Orleans when the dikes, the levees broke, and Minneapolis when the bridge collapsed. But the governors and the mayors of this country every day see at an operational level bridges that are rusting away and tracks that can't carry high-speed trains and power transmission lines that can't keep up with demand and airports that need new runways and water lines that need backup systems and sewage plants that leak into the...
This one's for Governor Schwarzenegger, Mayor Bloomberg. How do you answer those that, given both of your records in killer fiscal austerity policies, will just say that this infrastructure initiative is another form of Mussolini corporatism?
Well, first of all, let me just say, whatever you call it, the bottom line is that we need to build the infrastructure because you've heard all the arguments.
Infrastructure is the most populist thing you can do.
We see now that there is more money in the private sector than in the public sector. So I think it is based common sense that we say, here's a way to do it. I think more and more private investors are interested in getting involved in those kind of projects. I've used an example, for instance, up in British Columbia, where we have seen tremendous amount of buildings going on, where there's a public-private partnerships, and the labor is happy, the political leaders are happy, the people are happy, the workers are happy because everyone is working. So I think it's a great benefit. And that's what we want to do here in California, and that's what we ought to do all over the United States.
I think another thing, with private capital, you can do things that you can't do with the public's money.
It's always more expensive for private corporations to do these things than the government. The government is much more efficient at it, and the government doesn't have to make a profit on it, whereas the private companies won't do it if they can't make a profit. So it's inherently more expensive. And it's not really necessary if you have a proper government credit system.
In aerodynamics, the singularity of the shock front is generated as a result of the otherwise continuous functions of fluid flow. On the other side of this front, the usual laws of aerodynamics are altered. Actions which once caused an aircraft to gain altitude now lock it permanently into a fatal nosedive. The same is true of an economic shock front. The usual economic measures of lowering interest rates, raising interest rates, or issuing stimulus packages are all mere monetary measures which simply serve to contribute to the hyperinflationary collapse.
What they're doing with all of these schemes, the Fed loans, the money pumping, the stimulus plan, all of these things, is basically hyperinflationary. They want to roll this whole thing over.
Once again, as in Weimar Germany, we have reached a point where the solution must be a political one.
We either go to this reform or we go to fascism in that direction. And we have been drifting toward a fascist movement in policy, which was implicitly going toward hyperinflation.
The American population and the world now face an opportunity which was never given to Weimar Germany.
Under our Constitution, with a president and with the backing of a Congress which supports him in this, the United States can turn on a dime. Precisely such is the key to my proposed legislation, which is now before the Congress. That is, you cannot reform this system. You cannot improve it. It cannot work. There's no way of escaping catastrophe globally under this system. None. What you can do, and you can do under our Constitution, the federal government can act to create a firewall in which we protect, for example, mortgages and banks, that is, legitimate banks, chartered banks. We move to protect them absolutely under the same thing as a bankruptcy procedure. In other words, you're putting the system into bankruptcy under the authority of the federal government. That means that no household will have an eviction. We'll sort it out later. No bank will be shut down. No regular bank, no chartered bank will be shut down. They're protected under bankruptcy protection.
Since August